This is my best Arthur Fleck social distance impression. A couple days ago, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau recalled all Canadians from abroad, and any Canadian abroad had a decision to make. The decision was which, for me personally, is better: returning home to Canada or staying put wherever you are in the world. At the time, I reached out to a number of trusted people who I consider to be logical thinkers. This is an important distinction. Everyone and their pet dog can have an opinion about what to do, but I've noticed that 80 to 90% of the opinions have been based on misinformation, hysteria, and just widespread panic. I know I'm going to be sounding like some intellectual snob, but I am an engineer at heart and I make decisions based on evidence. In my specific circumstance, the evidence was pointing to continue your itinerary, but beware that time is running out for you to make a good decision. Okay. A lot will depend on where the Canadian finds themselves. In travel circumstances, the government recommends that you follow local news and local authorities. That can be difficult sometimes when you're abroad. Who do you trust? In a country like Canada, you can mostly trust the government. But there's always, in any country, developed, ancient, been mistrust with those in charge and in authority. It's just the way it always goes. So you have to weigh many, many different factors: news, authorities, that's one, two. You have to also observe what's happening on the ground. In the past couple of days, what's been happening on the ground is that Turkey kept its major attractions open. But that was also a day-to-day, hour-to-hour, second-to-second decision, like it has been everywhere else. With that in mind, I decided to hightail an originally relaxed style of travel into something that I compressed what was supposed to be 2 weeks worth into 2 days worth. That's the decision I made because I knew that the social distancing requests were going to come down sooner or later. Right now in Turkey, the situation is a bit different than it is in other countries. They're just starting on their corona curve. And I think the situation as it stands at least was safe enough for them to keep their major attractions open. In the 2 days where I decided to hightail it, I covered Pamukkale and Bodrum. Now, both of those attractions were less busy than usual, but still travelers were there. Local Turkish travelers, foreign travelers, even a tour group from China. So, in those attractions, they took their own local precautions. For example, Pamukkale, anyone who's been there knows that there's an antiques pool that you can swim in. The antiques pool is essentially one of Pamukkale's pristine pools, but with Roman ruins inside. You can swim amongst the ruins. I think the concept would have been a cool one, but they closed that off as the riskiest mode of virus transmission. And I think that was a good choice to make. Everything else was as usual at Pamukkale. I think there was enough space out in the open air for everyone to maintain their distance from each other. That's actually been happening largely already on the trip that I've been on. Because there are, let's say, only about 25% the number of people that there normally are in these tourist cities, the social distancing has happened naturally. And by naturally, I mean there's just so much space and so few people. In some ways, maybe people have noticed that I've maintained quite a positive outlook during this entire thing. I've only mentioned the disease a couple of times, and I've used the context of me providing traveling tips because I am an adventure traveler, an expert traveler. That's what I do. But in times like these, it's just better to keep a level head. If I were to have flown back to Canada, where I'm from, I have to practice the same social distance game that I'm doing right now anyways. So instead of falling victim to the completely chaotic airline situation, flight situation, mass transport situation, I just decided to basically end off in the best place that I possibly could and just chill out now. At distance, at home, if you will, and just see where things go from there. Some people have suggested that I could have just cut out the rest of Pamukkale and Bodrum, and I could have, but I made the assessment that they were still okay to go to, and they largely were. So sometimes, as much as the government will give advice, you might have to tailor it to your situation to do it the best way possible for you. They're giving more advice to prevent people from traveling abroad now. But for those of us who are already abroad, we're going to have to make that cost-benefit analysis. And for every individual, it'll be different. For some people, they're better off flying back to Canada. For some people, they're better off staying. For other people, there might be even third, fourth, fifth options. Who knows? Right now, it's a bit of a wait and see. I myself feel good. I'm healthy. I'm fit. I'm personally just doing the social distancing more because that seems to have become the new way of life. Even when I was at the tourist attractions, people were keeping their distance, and it's easy to do when you're in open air and you have plenty of space. So it's actually worked out to my advantage. And while I'm at these, excuse the pun, breathtaking attractions, I'm going to enjoy them. That's the thing. If you've made the decision of what to do, then you make the best of the circumstances mentally. What would have been my other option? Acting hysterical in Pamukkale? How would that have been helpful? If anything, keeping a cool level head has helped me come to the best decision for myself. And that's the thing that I encourage people to do, is that you have to come to the best decision based on evidence. But evidence might have to come in different sources. The Government of Canada is one source. Maybe your eyes, ears, nose, mouth, sense of touch, all of those things might have to be evidence to where you are. Like I said, the government of Canada can issue what I call blanket recommendations, but I think inherent in that, something that people have to understand, is that term non-essential travel. That term, even outside of this pandemic situation, has always meant that the person who's traveling has to make their own judgment about what's considered essential or non-essential travel and what is considered appropriate in their circumstances. That's often a difficult thing. I'm not saying it's easy. I actually had that algorithm running in the back of my head while I was having fun, and that's something that I've always done. That's actually something I've stolen from extreme athletes. I've studied extensively how they think and how they make decisions, and I've tried my best to replicate a similar approach because it's actually the best of all of the cumulative years of training I've had. As many people know, I do have an undergrad in electrical engineering. My subspecialty happened to be critical systems analysis, and part of critical systems analysis is risk analysis. Now, obviously, being out of that professional field for so many years, I've only been able to use what I call best approaches in assessing risk, which are proxies. The proxies are the Government of Canada and travel insurance, because they now do all the quantitative risk assessment for me, and I'm comfortable with that. I think I've largely followed the advice as best as I can. Part of the advice sometimes is to actually assess the situation on the ground where you are. Remember, the government has to provide advice for millions and millions of Canadians abroad, and to expect that that advice can apply uniformly, perfectly to every single situation is complete crapshoot. So obviously, everyone's going to have to tailor the advice to their specific circumstances. That's what I mean. Alright, I know this is getting quite heavy, but I might as well go there, because afterwards I'll have something new that I intend to do called Istanbul Instant Dance. Every day after today, I'm gonna play a random song and just dance my little heart out how I feel like dancing, and then capturing it on tape. It's like Makeup Free Mondays, but every day while I'm practicing the social distancing. It'll be a fun creative exercise for me, and I suggest that anybody who's also practicing social distancing to do something like that for themselves. Just keep it fun, keep it creative. Just because you're social distancing doesn't mean that you have to also have this morose attitude. I actually think this might be the best thing that happens to people en masse. When I was injured and rehabbing from a back accident about a decade ago, the best thing that happened to me was being at home and having some quiet time to myself to reflect on the situation, my life path, my life goals, and everything else. This might be that X factor event that causes many, many, many people to think, what the fuck are they doing with their lives? What are you doing? Are you in such a rush to go back to work to just become another cog in the system, a servant? Maybe this is going to completely change your outlook, and maybe that's what the world needs. I hope people aren't just mindlessly fucking children into a world like this. There's my antinatalist coming out again. Maybe this is exactly what people need to reassess what's going on in this world. Things have been relatively good enough to keep people from waking up to seeing what the situation really is. And that's the worst place to be in. At a certain point, maybe you'll get to a point where the things are so bad that you have to really reassess life top down and just burn the entire foundation to the ground and hope that new forest grows in the meantime. I think that's probably what's going to happen to a lot of people. Or I think if people resonate with me at all, that's the one thread that they can take, is maybe this is the opportunity that you need to reassess your life. Because as much as I do try to keep a positive outlook, I am living the best possible life I can given the constraints of this world. I've already done the best possible outcome that I possibly can do, and I'm someone who says it's really not worth all the effort to bring kids into the world if that's what you're here to expect. Part of the problem is many people bring kids into a world like this as their own selfish biological imperative. Yes, I know that's very difficult to unravel. That's literally like telling people to act anti to what their genetic replicators are basically doing. But it's possible. Maybe the reason why it's possible for me, at least, is I'm wired completely differently. I'm genetically completely different. Different doesn't mean better. I mean, I think it's better given the world we live in. But in any case, I hope that this serves pause for everybody. I know. X-rated existence and comedy like only this virgin can do. Where's the comedy been lately? I know, it's been very difficult. I think the word comedy means, to me, authenticity. Maybe I should be more precise with the wording. How do I even explain everything that I've been thinking? In many ways, I'm so happy that I've largely been able to see everything I wanted to see in Turkey. Captivating Cappadocia. I entrenched myself in our trenches. I think I experienced Cappadocia in a way that few people do, because I took the time to hike amongst her pristine white folds and all of that. I think I'm going probably long on this, but there's just been a lot that's percolated in my mind, and I'd yet to have a chance to just sit down and fucking shit it all out. Part of it's been difficult too, because until I had my final resolution, I wanted to keep all options open, and any suggestion that I had, I was thinking that especially those closest to me might hammer and hold me to whatever I say. In some ways, it's almost like them reading my Miranda rights, and I just wanted the freedom to think. That's a very important concept to me, is having freedom to think. And it's very difficult when people are coming at you with, in some cases, science, and in some cases, just pure hysteria. Now, often the line between those two things has become completely blurred in today's world. I understand. I feel ya. Sometimes even I'm questioning what's real and what's not. As a person of science, science is actually sometimes very messy, very much an art, if you will. For example, in medicine, much of the diagnosis relies on self-reported subjective symptoms or descriptions of situations. There's just so much going on, and this has become such a intellectual debate. I was really just wanting to introduce my Istanbul instant dance off, but now it's turned into something else. That's good though, see? That's part of my process too. Part of making good decisions for me is just literally spitting things out and just doing it that way. I've heard many stories about people having difficulty trying to secure flights, this, that, other, and just that sort of attitude, while I understand, is also something that just stresses me out being around that energy. That's why I largely avoided doing much with my trip in terms of trying to force things to happen. I basically took the approach of right now in Turkey, they've kept these attractions open. I have to be prepared that I might go to the attractions and have them be closed at any time. And with that in mind, I decided that I would finish off the rest of Pamukkale and Bodrum. Now, obviously, that gamble, if you will, paid off for me, so everything looks peachy keen now. But I think behind all of that, I had to be prepared that it might go sideways and be okay with it. Any other Canadian abroad is going to have to think about their specific circumstance, what they should do in it. And I think that people should be more concentrated on giving compassionate evidence instead of what many people are doing. It's this very weird judgmental combination. Now, obviously, I can be accused of being judgmental too. Me having an anti-natalist approach means I've judged every human around me, including myself, as being completely whack if they're thinking of having kids. But I also try to eliminate the personal connection. There's obviously emotions charged in these ideas and philosophies, but there's no personal connection. I hardly wish people to die or say they're wasting my tax dollars or all that. We're all idiots in our own ways. Who's to say who's wasting whose tax dollars? The person who's accidentally pregnant and has a child that then has to spend their whole life in the education system, work system, are they wasting my tax dollars? People who are morbidly obese and don't exercise and then die from heart disease, are they wasting my tax dollars? We've bought into a system where everyone's an idiot in their own way. Really, everyone's an idiot in their own way. Some people say that my adventure travel is idiotic. I say their smoking is idiotic. Some people say that my extreme sporting is idiotic. I say their binge drinking is idiotic. That's what I mean. There's no judgment really that people can make. The only thing you can do is understand that life is one big death march, and you just make the best of what you will. There are going to be certain circumstances where you're more cautious than others, and there are going to be certain circumstances where you're more adventurous than others. This is the balance of life. And I noticed that people have spent a lot of time judging this person, that person for their actions and decisions. I've heard that the kidnapped Canadian Edith Blyce has returned safely, at least according to Canadian government officials. I'm happy to hear that. She probably made some travel choices that I have yet to make, but being a fellow adventure traveler myself, sometimes it's very hard for me to make a judgment about others. The only thing I can say is that I try my best to listen to the government of Canada's advice, but even then, the reality remains that sometimes when the government of Canada has advice, you have to apply it locally the way you best see fit, just like everything in life. So instead of saying that it's wasting money if we paid ransom, this, that, and the other, I'll just say, as a collective of 30, 40 million people, we've bought into the fact that we're all paying for each other's idiotic mistakes. That's really what it is. There is not a single person who doesn't make idiotic mistakes or take unnecessary gambles and risks. Parents do that every day by having kids. Are they wasting my tax dollars? That's what I mean. If we're going to play the who's wasting whose tax dollars game, everyone comes out a loser. Everyone comes out a loser. Okay? So there's no point in saying, you're doing this and I'm doing that and they're doing this and blah, blah, blah. You either mentally buy into the system or you don't. So to me, when people say you're exceedingly reckless in your traveling, I'd say check your alcoholism before you come back to me. For those who are saying that I'm exceedingly risky in my extreme sporting, I'd say check your drug use before you get back to me. That's what I mean. Everyone's very good at pointing. I'll point right at myself. Obviously, I already am labeling myself an adventure traveler. I do make different decisions than most people. How do you think I've traveled and explored 101 countries? Okay, that's a unique experience that few people have. I mostly am already hanging around the other few people who have a similar experience, so I know. That's why it's mostly just about being confident in your own decision making, and that's all you can do. Now, obviously, there have been times where I've caught myself being biased and trying to select evidence based on confirmation bias. The important thing is to even recognize that's what you're doing before you can even start. I suggest people read up on cognitive biases in detail from experts, because I think your decision making improves greatly. I know that Nobel laureate Daniel Kahneman says that even with his Nobel Prize winning research into decision making that he himself has nary to improve, but I think he's making jokes and trying to be relatable. I think that his research has helped him probably make better decisions than he otherwise would have, and that's probably the sentiment that I will leave this long ass vlog on. I've done 30 minutes now of just me rambling coherently about a similar topic, and I think this has been necessary because I've needed to coalesce my ideas. The best way I coalesce them is to just talk, and if I'm going to talk anyways, I decide to turn the record button on because I'm sure people benefit from it. Does everybody benefit? No. That's why you have freedom of choice. If you would prefer Simon Sinek's way, Simon Sinek, you can watch him. If you prefer Gary V's way, Gary V, you can watch him. If you prefer Sam Harris, Jordan Peterson, Eric Weinstein, Brett Weinstein, who else is in the intellectual dark web? Douglas Murray, Lawrence Krauss, Brian Greene has been a good one recently. Brian Cox as well, the Joe Rogan crew. Joe Rogan's done a lot to open people's eyes up, and I'm happy that he exists. So the last parting thought to leave on is that I've made the best decision that I can possibly make given the circumstances for myself, and I hope that every other Canadian abroad and every Canadian in Canada can do the same for themselves. Maybe it just requires you going into a quiet place mentally and assessing all of your options in a logical, evidence-based approach. I hope you can make the best decision for you, and once you are confident in your own process, then just be decisive in your actions unless something comes to light that makes you have to reassess. So I'll be doing my best Arthur Fleck for, I guess, however long it seems necessary. And starting tomorrow, Istanbul Instant Dance.